We will let everybody stream into the stream. Welcome everybody to the last session, day 4 of TMF week. We have a TMF Fireside chat today, which is incredibly exciting. We've got our biggest and our best panel of the week. We're going to be getting started in a few minutes. If you guys, as you're folding in, want to let us know where you guys are watching from, and if you can see our screen correctly, that would be great. The format of today's presentation is a little bit different. In fact, it's not a presentation at all. It's a discussion among experts. And your job as an audience is to try and stump this expert panel with your most difficult TMF-related questions. Thankfully, we've got really great representation from all stakeholders, or at least as many as we could round up on a Thursday afternoon. And with that, I'll start to introduce today's session. Before I jump into that, just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Apologies for in session before this many times. All sessions today will be recorded, including the one you're in today, and will be available at the end of the day. So if you need to drop out for a meeting, or if you join late, you're able to take a look at this recording after the fact. All attendees to today's session and any session at TMF Week will receive a certificate of attendance. You'll receive one certificate of attendance for the entire conference, not one for every session you've attended. This is an interactive session, probably the most interactive session of TMF Week, so feel free to ask questions. We do have a series of questions that were collected prior to today's session, as I mentioned, but that does not mean that you can't submit your own questions during the session, so please do so. Questions answered actually throughout the presentation, so not just at the end. And then there is, of course, the networking lounge and the networking break following today's session. So if you want to catch up with any of the speakers, you can do so there. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on asking the experts anything. This is a TMF Fireside chat. And with that, I will hand it over to today's host, Fran Ross.
Thank you so much, Oliver, and thank you so much, Montreal, for putting this TMF week on. Really appreciate the opportunity to get together and talk TMF ISF, and that's exactly what we're going to get into today. We've got a really fantastic gang of people who wear different hats in the TMF ISF community, and so I will just go around the horn for who I see. If you could tell us your name, your organization, the number of years TMF ISF, and then your favorite summer pastimes. And kick off with you, Robin Farmer.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Farmer. I work for Grail LLC. I am entering my 18th year working within the TMF. And my favorite summer pastime, recently I started a tradition with my cousins that we all make sure to make time for each other in the summer. So we all get together and do a little family time, which I do enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanne.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanne Malia. I'm from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. I've been in the industry for a long time, more than I want to say. And my summer pastime is just spending time outdoors with family and friends.
Beautiful. Thank you. Etienne.
So hello, everyone. I'm Etienne Hinton. I am a TMS assistant specialist. I am at Duke Clinical Research Institute. I am about 15 years in the industry. And apparently my favorite pastime is being the bus driver for my kids where they want to go in the summer. So that's all I get to do is drive them around and keep them happy.
Beautiful. Thank you. JP.
Thanks, Fran. Hi, everyone. This is JP Michelli, Director of Document Management at Advanced Clinical. Been in the TMF industry for almost 20 years now, with the last 4 of those or so on the CRO side, sponsored prior to that. And favorite summer pastime is pretty simple, just going outside and laying in the sun, soaking in the rays.
And Mr. ETMF, please.
So I take it that's me.
That's
I'm not sure if I deserve such a big title, but great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Fran. I'm Paul Fenton. I'm with Montreal. I've been in the TMF world for about 16 years now, I think. And my favorite summer pastime is swimming in my lake at sunrise in the country. So you get out of bed and you just go swimming. It's fantastic.
We'll see you there. If not literally, then virtually. Put up a lake picture later. To seed the session here today, I sent y'all an email saying let's make it a little bit fun and make sure that everybody knows everybody's got TMF, ISF, OMG. And I'll start in reverse order. JP, I'm going to put you on the spot first. What was your holy guacamole TMF situation? And more importantly, how do you now prevent that from ever happening again?
Yeah, so I'll obviously give all my responses from the CRO perspective, but one of the things that I've seen where it just makes me say, oh my God, over and over again. So unfortunately not an isolated experience, but just a lot of scrambling around at the end of study to resolve issues and collect missing documents, especially as closeout visits are trying to occur and people haven't done enough reconciliation prior to that. So it's always an OMG moment for me. So we really try to kind of step up and increase the level of reporting, metrics, and communication as that time approaches, so that when people are going out on their visits, they're fully equipped and knowledgeable of what they should be collecting before study closeout. So that's my experience, Fran.
Thank you, JP. That's a great CRO insight for sure. I think we, as the sponsor community, may not appreciate that the CROs have OMGs as well. Ms. Robin, can we get your perspective on your OMG and how you make sure that doesn't happen again?
Sure. Well, we all hear the phrase inspection readiness, which is really a state that you need to always be in. I did have a situation once where we got a surprise inspection. It literally showed up on a Tuesday morning. Nobody was expecting it. We were all having coffee and chatting, and there's the FDA. So a state of inspection readiness, I think, in a situation like that, you find out what that means, even just down to, how you keep your TMF at the end of the night, if you're ready to pull documents in the morning, all of that. So definitely just taught me, how to be more inspection ready for that situation.
Nothing like having them knock on the door and not expecting that knock. Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Robin. Etienne, from a site perspective, what's your biggest, oh boy?
My biggest oh boy was when we had someone who was working there who got kind of mad and took documentation that was supposed to be in binders and shredded it. So that was kind of like oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? So, we tried to put some stuff in place about having, documentation backed up electronically as well as, if it's in paper, trying for that situation to never happen again. So we try to put some safeguards in place so that wouldn't happen again, but that was an oh my God.
Nothing like real world OMG experiences to change practices. Joanne, let's hear your number one.
Sure. We had been working with the CRO for a while and had some key personnel. And at one point, the person told me, wait, I never heard that all of our studies needed to be always inspection ready. And I was like, what? How could you work with us and not have heard this at least once or twice a day? So we actually started putting in place more training, more reminders in all of our emails, in our plans, bolding certain fonts and stuff to really get that message out there.
Messaging is so critical when it comes to the activity that folks consider to be a little bit drudgery, perhaps is a good word. It's going to roll right into our next topic about TMF culture, but I wanted to share my OMG, which is when I shut the corporate center down, opening up an archive box and finding Petri dishes inside. So hazmat situation went on, and right after that, we started controlling who could send any boxes to Iron Mountain. That was a very tight control after that incident. We had a lot of people answer the survey question, and I just want to read some of these questions directly because I think it all falls into the same sort of theme. How do you convince contributors that TMF is not just for inspections? How to convince the study team that TMF is essential? What's the most inspirational way to get people to file TMF in a timely fashion? How do we impress upon users that filing in a timely fashion is important? How do we drive an inspection-ready culture when TMF process and system complexity seems to be increasing? How do you deal with the discrepancy in TMF between responsibility and authority? And as I read and reflect on those questions, it sounds like the community of TMF and ISF management is still struggling with getting the profile to the right level for the criticality of the trial master file. And so we'll go back in. Well, I'll pick on Joanne first. How have you most effectively impacted the culture at Regeneron around the criticality and the importance of trial master file?
Probably the number one way of doing it is having inspections. Because when you have inspections and you involve a lot of people, the importance of the TMF becomes very evident. Now, obviously, you don't want to do that until you're ready, and obviously you don't get to choose when the inspector is actually coming. But having mock inspections, really tough mock inspections, can sometimes lead people to understanding that, but also showing people the regulations and what they really mean. And then also showing them what could happen if they're not ready.
Fantastic, thank you. JP, do you want to speak about this TMF culture awareness improvement, raising profile from a CRO perspective?
Yeah, and from the CRO perspective, I quickly learned, like jumping over from the sponsor side, that kind of the disengagement of users on the CRO side is arguably a little more difficult to deal with because they're working on a lot of other activities on the study. So, really engaging your users and, raising the awareness and importance of timely filing, accurate filing, offering additional training when needed, holding people's hands when they request it and not just being like, well, here's a report, here are all your past due documents, I need them yesterday. Just being there to really use them has been really helpful for us.
Paul, from a vendor perspective, have you seen a transformation in TMF culture over the years that you've offered an eTMF system? Do you think that the awareness is growing? Do you think that the critical nature of the mission? Go ahead.
I think for the longest time, everybody thought about the TMF as kind of an afterthought. It's just an archive. We have to have the documents. As long as they're there at the end of the study, we're good. I do feel that over the last 2 or 3 years, things are changing. People are starting to realize the value that they can actually get from the TMF, and it's not just an archive. It's actually a living tool that can actually help you manage your study better. And as we start to see the evolution in the technology itself, and there's a lot of focus on creating better insights and better metrics, and even mining the documents to pull out the data using things like AI. All of a sudden, we're going to get much richer environments, and even environments which are akin to things like CTMS, where we go to a CTMS to manage our day-to-day activities. I think that's what's going to happen with TMF as well. And so there is a hunger for things like that. That's what I'm seeing within the community, but also as a vendor, we're getting asked about those things.
Fantastic.
So it's exciting times.
Robin is the second sponsor on our panel. Any other tips and tricks about raising awareness and promoting a higher sense of TMF criticality and raising the bar for TMF culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been fortunate to have a great records management group. And I really like to kind of promote the idea of, customer service, internal customers. So our, contributors to the TMF are our internal customers, and we're a service provider to them. So really trying to just keep that type of relationship so that, basically what Paul says, that this is going to be a repository that you can use. So we want to keep it up to date so that it's useful to you as our customer.
Beautiful. Etienne, did we give you a chance to chime in there from the site perspective?
Well, so you just want to make sure that you're aware of the system that's being used, and how often, number one, they do QCs, and in addition to that, you want to make sure that all of your documentation is up to date. So, if you get a new CV, if you get a new medical license, all of those things, you want to make sure that you have a good communication with the study coordinator and whomever you are dealing with at the sponsor level or the CRO level that needs, the documentation to be up to date. So as long as you're doing your part to make sure that the TMF is up to date, then, it will be.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very, very true stuff. My number one way to increase awareness and importance of TMF culture is money. I've often asked people if they've examined the contracts with the service providers and are there pleasures and penalties built into the contracts to make sure that it's not just milestone achievement, but it's documentation along with the milestone. Money talks. I don't think that story's ever going to change. We have, if anybody is on the session right now and wants to ask any other TMF question, this is your opportunity to try and give us a stump. A question that was asked in the poll before, though, was the most missed metric that TMF experts should be leveraging. What's the number one metric that you don't think is used that needs to get used now when we're moving into increasing TMF culture and raising the awareness of the criticality of TMF? Joanne, you smirk, so you get pinged first. What is your what would you recommend as the number one TMF metric?
The number one metric would probably involve completeness, because that is a really difficult one to actually get right. The number one metric that I think we need to focus on as an industry is timeliness, because that is really always hard. And it doesn't matter whether that's from a site, from our CROs, or even internally.
JP, was there any surprise for you in your CRO journey in developing reports from a provider perspective that made you get a light bulb? Oh, this metric is the one we want to dial into as a service provider?
Yeah, they're obviously all critical, but the one that kind of stood out to me, maybe a little surprisingly, was quality, because what I've seen is people sacrificing quality to achieve timeliness a lot lately. And that's just at any point during the study. It doesn't have to be at end of study, but all of a sudden someone starts accumulating a lot of past due tasks and the hammer drops on them from above, and then basically it's just a dump of everything they have saved on a shared drive. So it can happen at any time, and there's no pre-QC of those documents before upload. So we've really started focusing a lot on the initial quality when documents are received.
Etienne, from a site perspective, any number that you make sure that you and your team dial in on?
Completeness, quality and completeness, because you want to make sure that you're giving quality documents so the TMF can be as complete as possible. So you just want to hone in on those two.
Paul, from a vendor perspective, is your client community saying there's a showstopper here, we can't move forward if we don't have this measurement available to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are much more aware now of the importance of metrics, and the trio, quality, completeness, timeliness, of course, they have to be there. One thing that I am seeing a lot more of now as well is everything to do with sort of risk scoring, because we need to take a risk-based approach, right? And I think that a lot of organizations struggle with that, and so they'll ask us, so how do we take a risk-based approach with the TMF? And our answer is, well, right now it's quite challenging, and you need to kind of work out a mechanism sort of outside of the system for deciding, for example, what you're going to be doing secondary QC on, etc. But I think the metric that's really missing that I would like to see, and I know it's something that we're working on, and that's developing a risk score that can be actually calculated in the system. Because for me, risk score, it's kind of a combination of many things. It's a combination of timeliness, quality, and completeness, but it's also about recruitment at sites. It's also about queries and issues that we're seeing. It's about the risk of the particular artifacts we're looking at. Are they linked to safety or primary endpoints and things like that? So taking into account all of the different factors and coming up with some kind of risk score, I think, is definitely top of my list and top of our clients' lists.
Next,
thing to do.
2023 can be TMF Risk Week rather than just TMF.
There we go. That's an idea.
Robin, let's get your metrics insight. What's the number one? What metric keeps you up at night?
Yeah, well, of course, completeness is always top of mind, but one thing we've been able to do currently, and this hasn't always been the case, and we haven't always had the bandwidth, but we're actually just taking account of our monthly submissions and broadcasting that out to our teams, because I think sometimes that just kind of gives a visual of, well, we might be a little bit behind here. We only had X amount of submissions for this study per month. It's a little bit granular, but in our case, it just really works. Just kind of show what we have coming in, and then we divide it up by functional area groups as well. So we kind of just have an idea of just in whole what we've received, not by document, but just by numbers. And it just kind of gives an idea of maybe, if something's out there missing, maybe we should get it pretty quickly.
And there's nothing wrong with a little healthy competition, right? Study A, B, and C, you're doing great. Study D's in the yellow. Come on, study D. I'm going to ask a controversial question now. What's the best TMF software to use? And Paul, I'll have you answer that. I'm joking. We're not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. Best TMF software to use is your TMF software. Is the whatever TMF software you can use it. But here is a very interesting controversial question, and Etienne may have more of a site perspective on this than the sponsors and JP, the CRO, will. But what documents are routinely collected that have no specific regulatory requirement attached? Like the U.S. Lab Director CV, they're accredited and managed by other U.S. agencies. Do we really need to keep that into the TMF? So I'll take it back up a step and generalize it. Are there documents you believe that are routinely collected in the trial master file that's overkill, that we really just don't need it in the TMF? And I will speak from experience that a major life science sponsor made me aware that they didn't keep IRB or regulatory health authority submissions. And when you go back to the essential doc lists in Section 8, the submissions aren't required. The approvals are, of course, required, but the submissions aren't. And that was an eye-opening lesson learned for me. That was a decade ago. And I will pick on Joanne. Do you think that there are types of records that we keep in the TMF that's really just overkill?
I'm sure there are. What those are at this point in time, I hesitate to say, because each company requires certain documents, and it's not always the inspectors that ask for them. It's the internal teams that say, oh, I must have this. So it's okay. I'm not going to argue with you, but it does present a challenge, because now you have a lot more documents that you have to collect, maintain, and process. So
more is not necessarily better.
Correct.
Robin, have you had experience with record types that you're trying to hold the fort against?
I have, and I'm going to take a slightly different spin on the question in
Please.
that, there's some documents, I think, like logs and things like this, that we tend to receive as they're happening versus maybe end of study. And then we're having to keep these things, knowing pretty well that they may not be rectified at the end of the study, and we just have a lot of it. And I really think it's just promoting. I'm very team focused. So, the expertise of those who are kind of managing the documents to kind of know how best to handle them. With electronic systems, there's ways around that. Maybe they just stay in progress until the end of study or something that kind of marks them that way. Because to Joanne's point, it is different. Every company, I see something different from what wants to be held or not. But I think it's more so, I just feel that once the records come into our end, we're managing them. So we need to just be mindful of that to do the best we can for the whole of the TMF.
Hey, Tian, from the site perspective, are there any head-scratching record types that you guys get requested? Earlier this week in the site panel, they talked about the end-of-study scramble to recollect everything that had been collected, and that I'd never heard that one before. Still learning TMF. But from a record type perspective, are there sponsors or CROs that come to you guys and you're just not?
So there's a couple things because of what we do. There's documents that, as a site and as a sponsor and a CRO, there's documents that are designed to be single-use documents that end up becoming logs. And so you get different people with different information on a log. And so then when you have that document, trying to figure out exactly how to put that document and who to associate it with. And so when documents aren't used properly, or a document may have the wrong name. So things like that, when you're looking at some documentation, trying to make it be something that it's not can get very problematic, and it becomes difficult to either send to your study coordinator so they can put it into the TMF, or when you get it, trying to figure out how you're going to put that document into the TMF. So it's documentation being used in different ways, which makes it more difficult to put it where it's supposed to go.
Thank you. Yeah, sponsors, stop driving your sites crazy. JP, you've got now a multi-sponsor perspective as a CRO vendor. Any particular set of the records that is head scratching to you?
Yeah, it's not any one particular set, but I can certainly add that, more recently, last 6 to 12 months or so, I have noticed an uptick in terms of sponsors taking more of the customizing of a study-specific index into their own hands when we work to create it with them. So typically, they used to be pretty hands-off from that process and would just follow, the standard reference model index. But recently, there's a lot more things being pulled in or taken out, depending on the type of study.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. Paul, from a multi-customer perspective, anything that you or your team have been asked to manage that it's been a head scratcher from a vendor perspective?
A lot of our customers, as with JP, are sort of following reference model structure, which of course is great. But there are some instances, especially when it comes to devices or, more importantly, imaging, which can be challenging. So if you're looking at things like DICOM images, or very large image files, it can be quite challenging sometimes to manage them in the system. And we typically say, well, it's better actually to leave them in the imaging system. It's the same with devices. Sometimes you have like CAD files. So these are kind of design files for medical devices, and they're, again, very large files, and actually much better off in the CAD system than in the TMF and signpost. So sometimes we have to convince clients to do that. Most of the time they listen to us, but I think definitely those are challenging. And then the final sort of group of records that can be quite challenging as well is everything to do with like SAS data sets. So what do we do with the data sets? Do we store them in the TMF? Do we leave them on the SAS server? Which ones do we store in the TMF if we're really going to store in the TMF? So there's always a lot of questions around that as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Those kinds of situations can be challenging.
Yeah, for sure. Big files are not more fun. They're not too much more fun. And size matters. Did I just say that? Okay. Turning over to the next question is on sort of a different topic. When you think about the community of people that work with you in TMF, are there recommendations for good ways to get the TMF newbies up to speed quickly and support their journey in developing their expertise on TMF management? Is there a particular role or roles that would provide TMF specialist CTAs a chance to learn how to fine-tune their skills? And JP, I know you got one of the best TMF teams in the business, so I'm going to ask you, how the heck did you do that in your 4 years at the CRO, and how do you support their journey in developing TMF expertise?
That's simple. It's just me. I did it. So no, but it's really, it kind of plays into what I said before in terms of just promoting the overall TMF culture, putting the proper training in place, being there to support them, helping them to recognize the importance of the TMF and what happens when it starts to fall behind where it should be in terms of completeness and quality. And, as long as you're there to engage the people who are new to the TMF world and get them right away at the beginning before anyone else can corrupt them, then they'll be in good shape.
I don't think I've heard the words TMF and corrupt put together before, but I like it. Joanne, how do you
It happens.
skill development and TMF management awareness in the folks that have to deal in your environment?
We do a number of things. For those who are new and are actually in the TMF area, we often have a buddy system so that they are able to ask their questions in an unchallenged way with someone who's a little more experienced and can help lead them through that whole process. Additionally, for those who are outside, like in the clinical trial management area, they come to us a lot, basically asking, okay, can you tell me what essential documents are? And, what do I need to look for when I'm looking at these? So luckily, our staff is able to step in, give them some guidance as to, what the typical things are, what the expected documents are. So it's having that one-on-one relationship and that ability to ask questions in a non-threatening environment.
Etienne, any difference for you from a site perspective in raising skills and keeping people feel like their TMF growing?
So it's about training and consistency. So as long as you are pretty much consistently saying the same thing, it's easier to not deviate than it is to deviate and then try to figure out why you deviated. But if you're consistent in your training and your message stays the same, then it's easier. But as far as honing in on your skills, one of the things that we've done with our TMS stuff is we do a Friday forum. So every Friday we let people ask questions about whatever they want to see. And the group that I'm actually part of, we manage several different entities here. And so what we do is just, it's very open. You can ask whatever you want. You can get demonstrations. So we just try to make it very easy to come to. And so I want to say the week before last, we had our largest, group of people who were just there for the forum and wanted to see different things. So I think, again, consistency and being open. So that's one of the things that we've done. So you can get different things from different people. So I've found that tends to let people be a little more, because it's not really structured. It lets people let their guard down a little bit. And, you don't feel like you're going to ask a stupid question, or you don't feel like anybody's going to ridicule you for anything you might say. So we just try to, be open and be consistent.
Beautiful. I'm showing my favorite stuffed animal right now. We're here to help you, not hurt you. Not hurt. Robin, any different perspective from the Grail sponsorship?
Definitely a big fan of internal documents. We have a lot of internal documents just for our teams that we use. If we have a process and it needs to be done XYZ manner, then we just go ahead and spell that out and keep it updated. And it's something that we can all reference. So that when new comes on, they can reference this, and even internally we can. And definitely just a consistent message too, like was just said. Basically, I always say, if we're a united front and giving the same message, then that's always helpful even to our users, so they're not talking to one person and then, well, they said this. It's also a great tactic as well, I feel.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. We're going to delve a little bit closer into the technology now. someone had asked on the panel about, oh, okay, Paul, this is for you first. What level of software validation is required for eTMF? Is it GAMP 3 or GAMP 5? God save us, more acronyms. So can we let you check into that, and then we'll get the validation perspective from the others as well.
So I'm going to just first of all say what GAMP is. So it's Good Automated Manufacturing Practice, which doesn't sound like anything to do with TMF, right? It's very GMP, but it's also a framework for software validation with 5 different categories of software. Now, TMF is, for the most part, an off-the-shelf system, right, that you subscribe to. So usually it's a SaaS system, and it's usually configured because obviously you need to configure it to your organizational processes, to your index, and the way that you want to manage your TMF. So I would say that it's a category 4, which is a configured off-the-shelf piece of software. Category 3 is non-configured, so it's definitely not category 3, but it could be category 5, which is bespoke if you built your own in-house TMF, which doesn't really happen very often, but there are companies that do it. When it comes to category 4, what's important is to leverage what your software vendor has done in terms of validation, because they've already gone through a lot of different testing and validation and documentation of the system. And what you should be doing as a user or as a sponsor or CRO is basically doing what we call user acceptance testing. So making sure that the configured system does align with your configuration specifications, so how you want it to work. So you will do some testing, and usually your vendor will help you with that. They'll probably provide you with support and scripts, but the goal is really to verify that we have configured the system properly and that it meets your intended use. And that's the question that the inspector will ask. How did you verify that this system meets your intended use? And the way you do that is through this user acceptance testing.
So I'm going to change the question up a little bit for the CRO site and sponsor folks. How much validation is too much validation? And Joanne, I know you have some significant opinions on that question. And so, and if the industry doesn't know where I stand, if you're doing more than you're doing for your EDC, or even as much as you're doing for an EDC, for your TMF, you're doing too much. Go ahead, Joanne. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Paul said. You really want to leverage what your vendor has actually done. And then, so that means you have to go out and do an audit, make sure that they have tested all the requirements, make sure that the audit trail, they did test an audit trail. It has an audit trail. And then when you bring it in-house, you should have user requirements that say, well, we want this system to do X, Y, and Z, and then test that the system is doing it once it's configured for you, or, it's all in place. You need to make sure that it's installed properly, that it is fulfilling all of your requirements. And one of the things that you probably should also include is just to make sure that from the vendor audit, anything that might have been an area that maybe the auditors didn't think was tested well enough, you might want to do a little bit of testing there. Like make sure that that audit trail does work, it's turned on, and that, those things, those regulatory requirements are met. But other than that, that's all. Now, GAMP is also for your manufacturing group. And it's also important for companies to find out if their validation team or procedures is actually following GAMP, or if they do allow you to look at other models. I would highly recommend that if you have a GCP type system, you try to look at other models, or you'll be doing a lot more than maybe you really need to do.
JP, bus is coming for you. How much validation is too much validation?
I mean, I'm gonna, just agree with a lot of what Joanne said. Leave the majority of it on the vendor, but obviously with our in-house eTMF, we're doing validation as we see fit when there are system updates either made by the vendor directly or if we're doing internal configuration changes. We assess the risk level of that and how it impacts end users, or is it more behind the scenes, and then we do the appropriate level of validation and test script execution after that. But I'd say we're not on the too high of a level of validation.
Robin, what's been your experience at Grail?
Well, one thing to add is I think it's great if you can to have kind of a built-in person, working closely with you for validation. We do on our team as well, who's actually managing these changes, security matrices and the testing, writing the test scripts, and that's been very helpful for us because it's ever changing. So we're probably on the maybe a little bit too much, but it is directly related to what we're actually needing to do with the system. But I think it's definitely one of the differences in the evolutions of the TMF over years, right? Going from records rooms where it was just about key card access and that piece of it to now having these full-on systems where every change requires some sort of validation. So to always be mindful of that. And then one thing that we've been doing is prioritizing. And before we were kind of like taking everything that was coming toward us, like, oh, somebody needs this, we need to do this, it's going to require validation. And now we have to prioritize it and give those timelines to the requester that this falls on this end of the priority. And that's helped us a lot from not being being overburdened by these validation requests.
Thank you, Robin, for sure. The burden is real. Etienne, hard to imagine this burden on a clinical site. From the site perspective, how is your validation journey, and when do you believe too much is too much?
Yeah, that's not really that's not typically, but there are certain things where when you're thinking about documentation, you're like, most of this stuff comes up in your startup meetings or in your initial meetings. Your essential documents that you have to get to the sponsor or to the CRO. And then, when you update those, sometimes you have to worry about the CROs or the sponsors' SOPs. You want to make sure that, I know for one, Duke's SOP is that, they don't collect a medical license after the site's been activated. But it's like, because, I guess in someone's thought process, they don't stop being a doctor because medical license, this one expired. They're no longer a doctor. So it's not typically our bag, but we do have to be aware of, which documents and which systems have to be validated.
And it's amazing to think, really, that if you could just get your study team to validate the TMF index once every 6 months, how much better would our lives be? My favorite TMF question of all time appeared in our live Q&A here. And so, can a TMF be too clean? Can a TMF demonstrate so few issues that an inspector will dig even harder because they will be convinced something's rotten in Denmark? There's just, this TMF is too good looking. JP, because JP, good looking. Let's throw you under that bus. Do you think there's a scenario under which a TMF can actually draw more scrutiny because it appears to be so perfect?
With no direct experience or oversight of any TMFs that went through a situation like that, I can imagine it, and I have heard things before. But mainly where there have already been other issues potentially leading up to that. That an inspector is aware of either going in or through a related study that's been inspected. But I can certainly envision a scenario where that could be, especially with the amount of data that, if they're, accessing the TMF audit trails and things like that, that can really open up a lot of those things that may not really make it look as clean as it actually is on the inside. So.
Joanne, let's get your perspective on this. Too clean for school.
Yeah, the only time I think this would happen, and I'm just putting on my old auditor's hat, is if I was looking at a paper TMF and everything looked pristine. You know, you didn't see any wrinkled edges. Everything was nicely organized. I would sort of wonder, so what are they doing in the back room? Printing it out? So I guess that would be the one situation that I would think of. With eTMFs, they're pretty, you know, they are what they are. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Etienne, any site CRO perspective on a too clean TMF? Would it worry you if you were looking at something that looked like, you know, TMF elves had managed it?
It would concern me because I would, I would have an idea of the documentation that they've received. So there should be pieces that I'm aware of that may or may not be clean. So it would concern me, but I don't think that I would look into or want the TMF to be looked into even more, trying to figure out if it's too clean. But it would concern me. Now, some issues make sense. No issues, unfortunately, does not. But I think I would be okay if there weren't any issues.
Robin, any perspective from you on a too clean TMF?
I've not had the luxury of seeing one yet. But I did have a situation once with an MHRA auditor where we were giving our presentation on the layout of our TMF. And I think the way we presented it, she felt like, you know, I really want to get in here because you're kind of perpetuating that it's so organized. You know, I'm going to see if that's true type of a thing. And then there were things that she had suggestions on, of course. But, you know, perhaps from an organized format, as far as content based, probably not.
Thank you all very much. Paul, I'm not even going to dare to ask you that question, but I am going to ask you, there seems to be live questions and questions from the survey about using software, compliance scanning apps, the use of cameras to take document pictures. Where do you see the industry at, and what do you see coming?
So I think it happens primarily at the site, right? When you have a monitor visiting the site and they want to get a document into the TMF quickly, or the site just sending photos. In terms of compliance, it's a tricky one because obviously there's the concept of having a validated copy. And if you think about it, you know, if the source document is at the site, you're taking a photo of it and then putting that into the TMF, it's a copy. Yeah, the source remains a source, it's a copy. And so do you have to have a process in place to ensure that it's a true certified copy of what was at the site? I think that that's quite challenging. And I haven't seen any software that sort of, you know, advertises that they're able to produce certified copies. Having said that, I think it's still an acceptable practice as long as you recognize that the source is at the site, and obviously the monitor should be doing a verification between the copy that you have and the source document. I think it will become more prevalent in the future. We'll see more and more of it, and hopefully we'll have the ability to start to sort of produce what we call OCR scans of those photos, so that we can still kind of manage them and understand them in the system as we start to sort of identify documents more and more automatically through AI and stuff like that. I have seen one specific application that is provided by an Australian vendor, I forget their name, that specifically focuses on that. So taking photos, producing a PDF, and then sending that PDF with metadata about, you know, which processor, which section, which artifact, etc. I'm not sure how widely it's used.
JP, with your amazing numbers of monitors out there in industry, do you see trends in people using their photos to take especially site record pictures?
Yeah, we'd certainly, hear more and more from monitors who want to use that functionality when they're out on site visits. But again, I think it was Paula might have mentioned the validation piece of it. Unless it's something that our internal IT team has validated as being able to, safely and securely snap that picture and not have it end up in your phone's Instagram account or somewhere else, it's not available for use. So yeah, it is something that's important to manage internally within your own company, and making sure that that data is being securely captured and then uploaded to the eTMF eventually.
Etienne, from a site perspective, have you seen a wide variation in practices for monitors being able to take snapshots of documents?
Yes. So based on my knowledge, I've seen people taking pictures. I've seen people that had like it was like a little flat scanner thing that they could scan, and it would become a PDF. So I know, of course, pictures are easier, and then depending upon what kind of phone you have, whether you have Android or Apple and all of these things, and different phones that do different things. So there's been a wide swing. So I don't know that there's been a lock on you should do it this way now, or this way is acceptable and this way is not. So until that happens, I guess we're going to see the swing of the pendulum.
Joanne, any Regeneron perspective on taking snaps of docs?
Sure. We have one CRO that has an application that has been through like their IT and validation process that takes a picture of documents and converts them to a PDF. We allow those into the TMF. We really try to discourage pictures from coming into the TMF because you can't really search on them. We don't have anything specific with our TMF that we actually use or do, except for, we really try to discourage it, except for with this one CRO.
Yeah. Robin, any different perspective from Grail?
No, about the same as Joanne. What we've noticed is the quality sometimes isn't that great. It's very small, or just doesn't look like it's complete. So we have asked for resubmission of those documents. So I think we have a little ways to go on that yet, but I can understand the appeal. I just think we're not quite ready to.
Sure. I'm going to move us into our final panel question of the day, because this is a great segue, because I have a number one wish. So the final question of the day, and we've gotten other things in the live chat and the Q&A and on the initial survey, and we will get answers back to all of you who asked these wonderful questions. We really appreciate your interactivity. Number one wish for TMF ISF future. My number one wish is no more paper at the sites, people. There's nothing to take a picture of if we create all this stuff electronically. So this 2022, 2023, I would hope that the industry makes this the year of site electronic records, and let's stop the noise. And I will now ask Paul, what's your number one TMF ISF wish?
It's tough. I have so many wishes, but I think my number one wish is for us to take a different approach to organizing documents. So not organizing them functionally like we do today, but actually organizing them around processes. So more sort of clusters of documents around specific clinical trial processes so that they're easier to understand as a group.
Love it. That sounds delicious. Miss Robin, you only get one TMF ISF wish for the future.
I'm hoping for some more innovation just around the TMF overall. Hearing some of these questions that we've heard asked for so long, I think we're slowly getting toward where the TMF is more all-encompassing now. It's not just clinical operations documents. We know that. I think just more understanding around the importance of the TMF and innovation around how we can really make that understood, and then perhaps to your point, Fran, more technology that would probably help that if it were somewhat easier. The way we're still handling it is maybe a little archaic. So just some innovations around that will just make the TMF kind of second nature.
Beautiful. Thank you. JP, we're going to put you on the spot, and you can have 1.25.
All right.
Your number one
1.25. I'll take it.
TMF wish. And what can we expect you to talk about next year that you got done?
All right. So for my number one wish, it would have to be technology based. So more automation and more interoperability between systems. Really love that because it just helps you in so many other areas in terms of the process and just managing the TMF that, we're still so early on into what that can really become. And, I'm just excited to see where the future leads us in that area.
So, Paul, you've got your first speaker lined up for next year. Etienne, your number one wish for our record management future.
So mine is multi-layered, but it's only because the document doesn't change going from the site to the CRO, but the systems that it goes in or that it ends up being in changes. It can be in a CTMS, it can be in a TMF, it can be in the sponsor TMF, it can be in the CRO. So it's just ease of use. It's the same document, but why it has to go through so many changes before it gets to the end of where it's going to go. So what would be my wish, which I know will never happen, but if you could put it in one place and it go to everywhere that it needs to go from being put in that one place, that would be my wish. That would make it easy for everybody to use it. It wouldn't matter if you're at a CRO, if you're at a site, it wouldn't matter because you put the document in one time and that's the only time it ever needs to go in.
Beautiful. Paul, you just got your roadmap command for the next No one else has anything else. We'll wrap up with Joanne.
What I would really love, and it's sort of based on what everyone has been saying, is, a sort of a pipe between the site and the sponsor TMF. Portals are being discussed a lot. I really think electronic is the way to go. So it would make it easier. But we definitely need some sort of a pipe between the two, because frankly, I think and I've thought this for a while, it's silly to say documents can't come in until the CRA goes out to the site and picks them up. It's like they have much better things to be doing at that site visit rather than photocopying or taking pictures of documents. They really should be, concentrating on those things, and we can deal with the paper or the documents some other way.
Thank you. For sure. Sing it, choir. We have a couple of really straightforward questions in the Q&A, and I am just going to egotistically answer these directly. And when I lie to the community, anybody on the panel, just shout out, Fran, that's a lie. Filing documents in a package, why the heck not? Go for it, unless you've got individual doc types that you need to account for, and then you got to break that package open and put them in the right doc type. But if it's a package related to a doc type, sure, file the package. If there's a 1572, a CV, and a monitoring log all in a package, you got to break those out and put them in the right record type. Having zip files in the TMF, go ahead, Governor. There's no reason not to have a zip file in the TMF unless you make it impossible for someone to unzip that stuff and look at it later. There are circumstances where you've got zips because of the file size, and that's the way you have to manage it, and that's the way you're going to have to manage it. But if it's zipping for convenience, and again, not differentiating between a bunch of different record types, that's not best practice. You want to get the right record in at the right record type. And there was one more question that is, redacting, PHI, complying with privacy, and privacy in TMF is not just for the participants, but there's privacy laws globally that also protect the privacy of the folks who are the trialists on your study, whether they're in-house or out-house. I didn't do that again. Whether they're internal or external. So you want to have some pretty good practices about privacy and redaction within your TMF, and wonderfully, AI and natural language processing can really help out there identifying what data points may cause privacy triggers and having your system help you identify those to get those records redacted. Woo! That's it. That's a wrap. Thanks again to Fentium. Oh my God, to Montreal and Paul for being on the panel. Thank you, JP, for bringing your salient CRO and all other perspectives. ATN, we wouldn't be here without you. Joanne, so good to see you. And Robin, really, thank you for bringing the different Grail perspective. Oliver, back over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Fran. Seems we need to change our company name, Paul, to what Fran suggested.
Frontier.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I can see how you got there. That was a lot of questions. I commend you guys for being able to tackle that many questions and give that much context. An absolutely phenomenal panel, one of the best panels I've been a part of. So thank you guys for joining us at TMF Week. Thank you to the audience, not only for submitting fantastic questions, but for being here for a full hour. I just wanted to draw your attention to what's happening tomorrow very, very quickly so everyone is aware. This is the program for tomorrow's session. It is our last day, and it is International Clinical Trials Day tomorrow. So if you're not in the TMF conference, what are you doing? So 9 a.m. we've got Making TMF Change Personal, Building Accountability into Your Metrics program with Crystal and James from Syneos. Then we've got some networking breaks. Then we've got a session from Daniel at Shinogi. What would I find in your TMF? Top 10 problems and the best practices to avoid them. Then we've got our very own Joanne is back for a session on TMF metrics. They aren't just for marketing anymore. And then we will finish the session, finish the day, finish the conference with a TMF trivia pub quiz hosted by yours truly. So with that, I want to, I'll close the session for today. Thank you again to all of our panelists. It's been an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you, Fran, for being a great host.
Thank you for having us.
And Fran, you rocked it as usual.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.